What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. It is podcasting season, and I don't mean that because I'm rolling out season 8 of the Matt Report pretty soon. If you haven't listened to an episode of the Matt Report, it's all about WordPress entrepreneurship. I'm sprinkling in more stuff that's not just WordPress. It's a lot about maybe what's happening on this channel, which is more generic business and entrepreneurship, marketing, and generally trying to get through life while running a business. But it's podcasting season because I'm getting these messages, emails, contacts, Twitter DMs, and it's a lot of people looking to be on the show. And it really is something that's always bothered me has been the way people have asked in the past. And I think a lot of this stems from this whole, underpinning of marketers ruin everything. And there's this whole push to get, VAs and virtual assistants that will go out and do all the dirty work for you and send contact forms and ask for links and ask for podcasts and say that you're representing Joe Schmo or Jane Smith, who has built this amazing business and they want to be on your show, and here's what we can do. And oh, by the way, don't forget to link to our product when you have us on the show. And that stuff really gets under my skin. And if you run a podcast out there, I'm sure it bothers you too. It's funny, I know this stuff works when people ask to be on things like, you can't get what you want unless you ask for it. I totally understand that. In the world of marketing and online, link building and relationship building, selling, a lot of it is numbers, right? So if you can talk to 100 people, can you sell 10? If you talk to 100 people, can you get on 10 shows, that kind of thing. And I totally get that. And it totally works when you go for the big numbers game. But for my podcast, I generally only reach out to my guests. I've had a few people approach me that have some really good backstories or have just, a shining example of being a great person in the community, both in WordPress and in my sort of offline podcast that I do. It's just the forceful or very vanilla, generic, I'm just trying to get on the show to get a link. And the one thing that really rubs me the wrong way is when another podcaster contacts me and they say, hey, I want to be on your show. Here's why. Here's what I can talk about. Let's see if we can make this happen, with no, ask to say, hey, want to be on our show too? Like, I'm a podcaster. Why do you feel that your content, your story, your dialogue is better than what I can provide to your audience? That's the one that really gets me. So in today's video, I know this has been a very long way to get to the meat and potatoes of this topic, is how to be a better podcast guest, starting from asking all the way to producing the podcast or showing up to the podcast that you're going to be on. First things first, it all comes down to the ask. So if you are going to go out there and you are going to sort of beat the streets and ask people if you can show up on their podcast, do it the right way. Do it in a way that you show that you actually care, because quite honestly, if I'm a listener of a podcast and I know that he or she is showing up just to show up, I can hear that, right? And in those types of podcasts, maybe it's just because I listen to a bunch of podcasts, maybe I've been doing this for a while, but I can hear the fakeness, the I'm just here to advertise. A good host will sort of weed those people out, but unfortunately a lot of people are starting a podcast and they'll look for guests because they're trying to create content. It's a very difficult wheel to spin. If you're starting off a podcast, you need guests. You can't be too frugal on the guests that you have show up, so you need to get those people on, and even if they're a big name and they're here to pitch anything, you'll do it anyway. I know I've been there in the past, so I totally get it. But as a listener, I can tell when you're there just to show up, to spit out a few hot topic phrases and move on with your day. Tip number 2, if you're gonna show up and you're gonna contact somebody, make sure you've at least listened to a couple episodes. I don't care if you skim through, like there are certain podcasts that I listen to on 1.5x speed because I like them, I like the content, but it's not always a consistent win for me, or they just have a wide range of guests. So some folks I'm just not super interested in, and that's okay, right? I see a lot of people, myself included, again, feel really passionate about the content that they're creating and wanting people to grasp onto every single podcast or every single blog post or every single WordCamp that they host. And they sort of feel offended if you haven't gone every minute of every day and read every line. And I totally get it. There's a lot of work that goes into this, but the harsh reality is there's a lot of stuff out there for us as audience members to listen to watch, and to read. So I know that my audience doesn't listen and hang on every word that I put out. I don't expect to do the same for other podcasts that I listen to, except for some entertaining ones. And even those I'll skip through from time to time. So if you're going to be a guest, listen to the podcast, understand how the host works, how the general show works. Again, a good host will do this stuff with you pre-show, potentially. And just try to care a little bit more about who you're talking to and who that audience is, and sort of work your message in and your story into that particular show or topic that they're hosting. Next tip, if you can avoid using virtual assistants to reach out to people, I mean, I'm sure this works in these run-of-the-mill podcasts that are getting maybe tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of views or listens a month. Maybe in this regard it works if you're going after some bigger fish, that kind of thing. But if you're going after small creators like myself, I don't want to interface with this buffer of a person. Or if you do have somebody that helps you out, I don't want to see this wall of text with links and all of this stuff that they're sending and who they represent, and they would really love to be here on the show. Have them reach out, or just instruct your VA to ghostwrite your response if you are reaching out. I just don't like the templated response or the templated contact. Here's who I represent. They would be a great fit. In a show like this, my first objective is to satisfy my audience, to protect my audience, to give them the information that I feel is accurate, entertaining, and educational. I don't want to put somebody in a position where they're just listening to a commercial, or again, somebody who's just making the rounds. Again, I don't fault you for going that route. I think that's a great marketing strategy and growth strategy, to go on as many podcasts as possible. Just try to care a little bit more when you reach out. Don't have your VA do it in such a weird way. Try to make it a little bit more personal. Our next tip is scheduling. Don't forget to show up. I just saw a tweet from my friend Joe Casabona today saying that he had a few Zoom conferences today where people didn't even show up and even respond. I've had that happen in the past for podcasts, and it just drives me crazy. That's one of the red flags where usually I'm talking to somebody, and if I don't really know them or know their backstory, some of these folks have been, big name SaaS people, and they've not showed up before because maybe they just, it got mixed up with their calendar. Maybe they looked at my show and said, you know what, this is just a small potato. I'm not going to show up on this guy's show. Or maybe they just simply didn't care or even forgot. But just the fact that, it's scheduled, I'm taking the time to prepare my calendar for you as a guest, or prepare some show notes if I even do that. But the idea is show up. I think that's common sense practice, right? In a business or in anything, you tell somebody you're going to be there, show up on time. Next tip, when you're on the show, there's a few things that need to happen. Now, it depends if you're doing video, it depends if you're doing just audio, whatever it might be. But try to spend some time, getting yourself in a good either audio, video, or both position. So have good lighting, have good audio. It's funny to me, again, I go back to one of the very first podcasts I ever listened to, which was Andrew Warner of Mixergy, and he was just interviewing somebody the other day that I was listening to, and I actually just stopped listening because, the guy that he was interviewing had called in like a cell phone or a landline, and it just sounded awful. So number one, I'm actually surprised Andrew, with all of the pre-production stuff that he does, at least pre-interviewing and getting people ready, that the guy used a phone, and maybe there was an internet connection problem that he was having, that they didn't prompt the episode with that. But in 2018, if you're trying to build an online business and podcasting is one of your avenues to grow attention, grow awareness to your brand or your personal brand, buy a mic. Buy a Blue Yeti mic. They're like $80 or $100 or something like that. I think they were just bought out by another bigger company. I can't remember who, but it's super affordable. You don't have to go crazy with getting a good mic. And if you're using your Apple EarPods, which I don't have, which a lot of people do, again, totally fine if that's all you got. But if spend a little bit of money if this is going to be something that you plan on doing a lot of. But even if you've got that Apple earbud, don't let the microphone rub up against your shirt, your scarf, your hair. Try to sound as best as you can on these podcasts. It's really just going to benefit you in the long run. The next tip is try not to control the show. A lot of people who are getting out and getting on podcasts or doing some live streaming stuff, very outgoing people. They're very, I guess aggressive is the first word that comes to my head. Sometimes they can really control the show, or if you're more technical, right? This is for a lot of people in the online space. even marketing, SEO, and certainly web development. If you're a very technical person, sometimes you can get caught up in describing every sort of either line of code and how everything works. Understand that you have to keep the conversation moving. Again, this only benefits you as people listen to you and get associated to your brand. They're going to look at you and say, hey, this person is educational and fun, and they're getting right to the point. Your host should do this, right? The person who's interviewing you, he or she should move the show along at a fairly good cadence, but just be aware of it, right? Sometimes we can get lost in all this technical stuff and ramble on, maybe like I'm doing right now. And here's a bonus one that goes along with this last tip is, especially if you're on a round table of other guests, right? Often, at least in the WordPress space or even on conferences that you go to and there's a panel of people, try not to just dominate the microphone. Try to think of your answer or your replies or the dialogue that you're having with others and try to keep it as concise as possible. Share the board, share the round table with everyone else there so that we as the listener can get everyone's opinions and everyone's thoughts. Again, a good host will move things along. Just be a little bit more privy to it. Our next tip goes maybe a little bit counter to this last one here, is bring some energy to the podcast. I mean, I've interviewed folks who, I feel like I'm just on a typical, enterprise conference call with them. It's like, it might as well be like 100 people on the call and they're just like, yes, maybe, no. Well, I did this and that's how I did it. And it's just like dead air. Again, if you're a podcaster listening to this, you should do some pre-interview stuff, get an idea of who this person is, how they talk, listen to other videos or podcasts that they've done in the past, and just prep them to, bring a little energy to the show if that's what your show is all about. But I would imagine that most people who are putting out a podcast need to find some entertaining value around this, some reason for people to listen to, and bring some energy if you're a podcast guest. If you know that you're not going to have energy at a certain time that somebody schedules something, reschedule, pick a different time. That's totally cool. As a podcast host, I would rather have somebody ready to go, energetic, and ready to just like pound through some of the material and the good educational stuff that you have in your brain for my audience, and not just sort of flat and boring, blah, 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 blah. Here's my last tip. It should have been my first tip. This is probably, this might be something that grinds my gears a little bit more. I'm sure this video is coming off more like a rant than it is a listicle educational piece. But promote the podcast when it goes live. Nothing drives me more crazy than when I publish a show or spend, the time and effort to produce a season. Luckily, right now, I'm only doing about 2.5 seasons a year, which has been something we can talk about in another video. But nothing drives me crazy more than the time I spend, producing, thinking of the story arc, selecting you as a guest, or maybe we had an interview and we said let's be on the show or something like that. Then we spend the time to interview. Then I spend the time and money to edit and write show notes and link to you and give you all of these praise and again introduce you to my audience, which is my most sacred asset of the podcast. And then not even a retweet. Spend some time retweeting at least once my initial tweet. Put my article or the podcast link of my site into your feed and get that thing moving. It drives me crazy because it's great content for yourself. I mean, it is a way to promote yourself, so why not share it? Why not turn that experience into an article for your blog post, put it in your email newsletter? I mean, so many people that I talk to, not everyone has a well-oiled content marketing machine, and even the folks that do believe that they do have a well-oiled content marketing machine, they know they can improve in areas, and people are always looking for content. So spread it across all of your social channels. One of the things I do with my local podcast, the We Are Here podcast, which is getting to kick back up again now in the fall, is I'll give folks my featured image. So I'll email them my featured image and it shows the logo, the episode number, and a picture of themselves that they sent me. And I say, hey, use this on your Instagram, post this on Facebook. Use this image because it's a cool image, you look good in it, it's a cool logo and all this fun stuff, but use this when you promote it. It helps me and it helps you. It's new content, it's fresh. And it just drives me crazy as a podcast host to not get the guests that reshare, retweet, and use it as evergreen content, link it up on their site. I mean, it's a great way for somebody to learn about you, right? If you're in the services space, the client services space, consulting space, if you're doing a run of a book of podcasts, guest appearances, link those up on in your bio, on your About page. It's a great way for people to find insights. Take a clip from the video or the audio and this awesome answer that you had about servicing clients and put it on your show. I mean, on your website and say, I was on, the Matt Report or whatever show you were on. Promote the content that the producer, the host is creating for you. It is a win-win for everybody. Let's just keep this stuff going. So that's it. This is a bit of a rant video today. It was just something that was on my mind so much. A lot of podcast folks coming in and asking to be on the show, which I love, and a lot of people have some great stories, great backgrounds, and I try to fit people in where I see a good fit. Most of the time my season is already mapped out. I already have my guests, I have my topic, but then I'll do bonus shows on YouTube or wherever else, and it's always good to have a backlog of folks that I can reach out to and extend the invite to. But listen, feel really connected to the podcast that you're going to be on. Have a good conversation. Don't forget to teach people, educate them, have fun with it. It's going to help out everybody. It's mattreport.com, mattreport.com/subscribe to join the mailing list. I'm back from vacation. It's the fall. Matt Report Season 8 will be out soon. Lots of fun stuff happening in the podcast YouTube world. We'll see you in the next video.